the dead of night, on a lonely road 30 minutes outside the city, a young man named Alex worked his graveyard shift. Age 16, Alex thought he had lucked into the perfect summer job: discounted snacks, endless soda, and an almost ghostly quiet. But as the clock ticked towards the end of his shift, an ominous encounter awaited him. The station was almost always deserted at this hour. Alex, a night owl, welcomed the silence as he scrolled through his phone at the counter. Time passed slowly, and after drinking too much soda, he headed to the bathroom, skipping the usual lockup routine. Who would even come out here, he thought. As Alex returns from the restroom, he immediately notices the stranger standing across the small gas station. The man is in the beer aisle, his body rigid and swaying slowly, like he's trapped in his own trance. The dim, flickering fluorescent lights cast unsettling shadows, making the whole scene feel surreal, almost dreamlike. Alex squints, trying to get a better look at this stranger, who stands with his back to him, unmoving, seemingly oblivious to the fact that he's being watched. The stranger is dressed entirely in black, a dirty, weathered hoodie with the hood pulled up and baggy pants that drag around his scuffed boots. His clothes are smeared with dirt, dust, and what might even be dried blood. The fabric seems stiff, as if he'd been rolling around in the grime outside before stumbling into the station. As Alex watches, he catches a faint whiff of something foul. The smell seeps across the room, an unbearable blend of urine, sweat, and a sharp, decayed odor that makes him reflexively cover his nose with his shirt. The whole store feels tainted, as if the stranger's mere presence has altered the air itself, turning it into something thick and hostile. At first, Alex is more curious than scared, watching the man's odd, mechanical swaying. But as the seconds stretch into minutes, an unease builds in his chest. The man doesn't move from his spot in front of the beer display. He doesn't pick anything up, doesn't turn his head, doesn't make a sound. It's as though he's frozen in place, stuck in some strange loop. 10 minutes pass and the stillness becomes almost unbearable, the silence pressing in around him. Finally, Alex clears his throat and calls out, "Sir." His voice sounds small, swallowed by the emptiness of the station. No response. The man just keeps swaying. Alex's fingers drum nervously on the countertop as he calls out again, louder this time. "Sir, are you going to buy something?" The stranger remains silent, continuing his unsettling sway, almost like he's waiting for something. Alex's skin prickles, the hair on his arms standing on end. The longer he watches, the more he realizes he's not just unsettled, he's truly afraid. The station, once a familiar and safe space, now feels like a trap, with this stranger as its haunting centerpiece. Alex decides he has to do something, anything, to break this eerie silence. The man's back is still turned to him, and his swaying has slowed, becoming even more unnatural, almost inhuman. The thought of getting close to him sends a shiver down Alex's spine, but his shift is almost over, and is desperate to get the man out of the store so he can lock up and leave. Taking a deep breath to steady his nerves, he steps out from behind the counter, his footsteps echoing on the cold, tile floor. The store feels strangely empty, the shelves casting long shadows that seem to loom closer with every step. As he approaches, Alex can feel his heartbeat thudding against his chest, each beat louder than the last. He notices the faint, unsettling details as he gets closer, the way the man's hood clings to his head, the fabric stiff and filthy, the dirt and grime smeared into every inch of his clothing. The closer he gets, the more overpowering the smell becomes, a sickly stench that fills his nostrils, making his stomach twist. He's only a few feet away now, close enough to see the stranger's hands dangling at his sides, fingers crusted with dirt and twitching slightly. Summoning what little courage he has left, Alex speaks again, his voice trembling. "Sir, you need to leave." His words are barely above a whisper, but they break the thick silence like shattered glass. For a moment, nothing happens, and Alex feels a brief, foolish sense of relief, as if the man might simply leave or vanish altogether. But then, slowly, the stranger stops swaying. The sudden stillness is even more unsettling. The man's movements are deliberate, almost robotic, as he begins to turn around. Alex takes a step back, instinctively raising a hand to shield himself as he watches the man's face come into view. The sight is worse than anything he could have imagined. The man's face is old, cracked, and smeared with dirt. A deep, fresh gash runs diagonally across his face, oozing blood that trickles down his cheek in dark, wet streaks. His eyes are milky white, devoid of life, yet they seem to bore straight into Alex, freezing him to the spot. Alex can't move, can't breathe. He's paralyzed by the sight of this grotesque, damaged face, every instinct screaming at him to run, but his legs feel rooted to the ground. The stranger stares back at him, unblinking, as if he's studying him, waiting for the right moment to strike. Alex's mind races, a chaotic swirl of fear and survival instincts colliding as he stands frozen in front of the man. In that moment, Alex realizes he made a grave mistake by approaching him. He feels utterly exposed, vulnerable, a mouse caught in the gaze of a ravenous predator. The stranger's hollow eyes seem to dig into his very soul, blank yet unnervingly aware. They radiate something dark, something twisted, and Alex can feel it sinking into him, fueling the terror that has already gripped every fiber of his being. For a second, the stranger just stands there, staring down at him. But then, with a suddenness that makes Alex flinch, the man raises his arm. His hand disappears behind his back for a brief moment before returning, clutching a massive, gleaming Bowie knife. The blade is smeared with a dark, reddish-brown stain, dried blood crusting along its serrated edge. Alex's eyes widen as he watches the man tighten his grip, his bony knuckles pressing against the handle with an unnatural strength. The stranger takes a step forward, his movements slow but deliberate, as if savoring the effect he's having on Alex. The dim lighting above catches the edge of the blade, casting a faint, sinister glint that makes Alex's stomach twist. The terror that had previously kept him frozen now begins to break, flooding his mind with one clear directive: run. But before he can fully process the thought, the stranger lunges, shoving him back with a strength that belies his frail appearance. Alex stumbles, his feet slipping against the cold tile, and he crashes to the ground with a painful thud. His heart pounds wildly as he scrambles to push himself back up, the cold fear sharpening into pure, desperate adrenaline. The stranger looms over him like a vengeful shadow, his knife held aloft, his gaze piercing, unblinking. Alex's mind goes blank, a single instinct rising above the panic: he has to get away. Ignoring the pain shooting through his arms and legs, he pushes himself off the floor and bolts toward the bathroom, his breaths coming in panicked gasps. He can hear the man's heavy footsteps following him, steady and relentless. Reaching the bathroom door, Alex throws himself inside, slamming it shut and locking it just as the stranger's hand slams against the outside. His heart hammers as he steps back, his gaze darting around the cramped, graffiti-covered bathroom. The door rattles with the man's pounding, each thud making the walls tremble, as Alex realizes he's trapped, with only a flimsy lock and a few inches of wood separating him from whatever nightmare lies beyond. Inside the cramped bathroom, Alex presses his back against the cold, graffiti-streaked tiles, his chest heaving as he tries to catch his breath. The dim light above flickers weakly, casting his shadow in shaky, elongated shapes across the grimy walls. Each thud against the door echoes through the small space, a dreadful rhythm of desperation and fear. The stranger is relentless, banging harder and harder, the force of each hit rattling the lock and making the flimsy door tremble on its hinges. Alex's eyes dart around the room, searching frantically for anything that could be used as a weapon or an escape route. But the bathroom is sparse, just a small cracked mirror, a stained sink, and a single grimy stall. A sense of hopelessness begins to creep in, his options dwindling with every bone-jarring thud that threatens to break through the door. Desperation claws at his mind, but he knows he can't give in to panic. He needs to think, to act. The tapping sound of the knife scraping against the door interrupts his thoughts. It's slow and deliberate, the metallic rasp sending chills down his spine. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, the stranger speaks, his tone low and sickly sweet. "Open up," he says, each word drawn out, dripping with malice. The sound sends an icy dread coursing through Alex, making his legs tremble. He presses a hand over his mouth, trying to muffle his shaky breaths, afraid that even the smallest sound will reveal his terror. Then he spots it, the small rectangular window above the toilet. It's narrow, barely big enough for a person to squeeze through, but it's his only chance. Without wasting another second, Alex scrambles onto the toilet, his fingers fumbling as he pushes against the frame. The window creaks as he forces it open, the cool night air brushing against his face like a promise of freedom. Below him, the man continues pounding on the door, his voice growing louder, more insistent, as though he can sense that Alex is slipping away. With one last, desperate glance at the dented door, Alex hoists himself up and wedges his shoulders through the tight space. The jagged edges of the frame scrape against his skin, but he doesn't care. He pulls himself through inch by inch, feeling the harsh grip of the tiles beneath his hands. Just as he wriggles his torso through the frame, he hears a loud crash from behind him, the door finally giving way. In a frantic burst of strength, he shoves himself fully through the window, tumbling headfirst into the gravel outside. Alex hits the ground hard, sharp gravel digging into his palms and knees as he lands outside. A jolt of pain shoots through his hands, but he bites back a cry, scrambling to his feet as quickly as he can. The early dawn air is cold and thick with silence, a stark contrast to the chaos inside the gas station. He looks back, his heart pounding as he sees the man's silhouette looming in the window, his filthy, blood-stained face pressed against the glass, eyes locked onto Alex with a terrifying intensity. Without another thought, Alex turns and bolts down the deserted road, his footsteps echoing in the stillness. He can hear the stranger crashing out of the building behind him, heavy footfalls pounding against the gravel as he gives chase. Panic fuels Alex's every step, his lungs burning as he forces himself to run faster, pushing his exhausted legs to their limit. The distance between them feels agonizingly small, and with every glance over his shoulder, he sees the man gaining, relentless and silent as a shadow. The road stretches out before him, endless and empty, a narrow path between looming trees on either side. The first light of dawn is beginning to seep through the sky, casting an eerie glow over the scene. Alex's breath comes in ragged gusts, his fear urging him to keep running. Finally, after what feels like an eternity, he looks back and realizes the man is gone, his figure swallowed up by the dim light of dawn. Shaking and drenched in cold sweat, Alex stumbles to a halt, relief flooding him even as dread lingers. The gas station sits far behind him, but the stranger's image remains burned into his mind, haunting him even in the light of day. As dawn breaks, Alex collapses onto the gravel shoulder of the road, every muscle in his body aching from the night's terror. His hands are still trembling, his breath coming in ragged gasps. The sky is painted in hues of soft pink and gold, but its beauty does nothing to ease the lingering dread clutching his heart. The quiet of the morning feels unnatural, heavy, like the world itself is holding its breath. In the distance, Alex spots a glimmer of hope, the familiar outline of a police cruiser parked at a rest stop just up the road. Gathering what little strength he has left, he stumbles toward it, feeling every bruise and scrape with each step. When he reaches the car, he practically collapses against the door, his voice cracking as he tells the officer what happened. His words come out in gasping fragments, and the officer's expression shifts from confusion to deep concern as the story unfolds. The officer radios for backup and cautiously escorts Alex back to the gas station. Together, they walk through the parking lot, every step tense, as if the nightmarish figure might still be lurking in the shadows. When they enter, the store is quiet, the air thick with a strange, unsettling stillness. The bathroom door is cracked, splintered from where the stranger had nearly broken through, but there's no other sign of him. No bloody footprints, no trace of the man who had terrorized Alex just minutes before. A sense of unease settles over Alex. The horror feels unfinished, like a dark promise waiting to be fulfilled. Though he's safe now, he knows that the memory of this night will haunt him forever, its shadows forever lurking at the edges of his mind, never truly gone. Days later, Alex stands outside his new job, the lingering scent of gasoline still clinging faintly to his clothes, a reminder of that harrowing night at the gas station. It's a quieter job, a daytime shift in a busier part of town, yet he finds himself constantly looking over his shoulder, haunted by the feeling that is being watched. Every shadow seems to hold that man's pale, lifeless eyes, and every creak of a door reminds him of the relentless pounding on that bathroom door. Sleep comes only in fitful, haunted fragments, and he wakes often with the image of that blood-streaked knife flashing before him. He's safe now, surrounded by people and bright daylight, but the memory of those eyes, blind yet piercing, haunts him, lurking in every dark corner of his mind. Despite the police report and the officer's reassurances, Alex knows that the stranger was never caught. Somewhere out there, the man who terrorized him could still be wandering the back roads, waiting. Each time he passes a deserted gas station or a lonely highway at night, he feels that chill, an echo of that night's terror, reminding him that some horrors never truly disappear. Years have passed, but that summer night remains etched into Alex's mind, haunting his quietest moments. He's tried to move on, filling his life with the familiar comfort of daytime routines and crowded places, far from isolated gas stations and lonely highways. Yet, no matter how much he tries to bury the memory, it resurfaces. Even the faintest scent of gasoline or the distant sound of a door creaking shut can send him spiraling back to the terror of those lifeless eyes and the blood-streaked face that seemed to stare into his very soul. Sometimes, in the dead of night, he wakes up with his heart racing, convinced he hears the steady, ominous tapping of that Bowie knife on the door. Shadows stretch longer, and the edges of his vision seem darker, as if something, or someone, is lurking just out of sight. He finds himself looking over his shoulder, even in the daylight, half expecting to see that haunting figure standing there, waiting. Alex tells himself it's just paranoia, a remnant of trauma, but deep down, he wonders if the man is still out there. Somewhere in the darkness, that faceless terror may be lying in wait, ready to resurface.